And we're live, I think, maybe. I don't know. I should probably add the Discord too. That would be smart. Should have done that like 10 minutes ago. But yes, hello people. I have Effect with me today. This is a strange episode of Colabria where I'm not alone talking to myself.
Yes, I am the second voice.
I'm not live, Jackal? Damn, how did you hear that then? Magic. You're telepathic, that's what it is. Must be, no other reason. Where's my announcements? Oh my god, where are announcements on this server? At World Builder. There we go. You're just that good, Jackal. I believe it. I believe it. Okay, so what are we doing today? We are basically going over a bunch of stuff.
Oh my god, a lot of stuff.
We're gonna try and do like a quick recap of everything. We're also gonna switch to this so you can actually see the text chat a little bit. You're also gonna see a little bit of behind the scenes because I actually have, in case you hadn't noticed, the website itself up. So I'm going to be adding some stuff as we go from notes that I haven't added yet. The website has a lot of shit on it right now. It's getting easier to navigate because I've made it easier. But how many words Effect do you reckon we have that are so difficult to pronounce? Ballpark figure.
At least, I don't know, at least 100.
At least 100? Yeah, I would probably say that too. So we have so many Google Docs now of different things to do with this.
Too many.
Yeah, so many. But let's start from the start. Let's start from the Teppy Wigs. This was the second episode of Colabria. The first one we were just building the actual map, the actual land masses, and creating something that we could build upon. And then in episode 2, we picked the Scarus Peaks as somewhere to go. Only to then focus on a very tiny section of it, which we came to call the Valley of the Unseen. So, yeah. We decided to make these Teppy Wigs, whose name are still probably my favorite, it just is. It just straight up is my favorite, name of a race that I've ever heard in my life.
It's Teppy-tastic, honestly. It's so good.
It is Teppy-tastic. So I've been editing the website a lot because I don't like some of the stuff that I've done. But we have got quite a lot of stuff written up on the Valley of the Unseen at the moment because I did actually manage to get that done when I was supposed to be at work. We'll ignore that. We have our little map, which is actually quite a cute little map, with Tripeti. Is that how we agreed we were going to say that? That's the town, the capital.
Yeah, there was
Tripeti?
some French influence in there.
Yeah, because it's like basically very small, like Tripeti.
It could be like Tripeti or something like that, but like it's...
Yeah, but like I
think
like Tripeti is just easy to say and it sounds kind of joyous and kind of fun.
Tripeti.
We'll just like the S is silent. We'll ignore it.
Don't tell Barna.
Don't tell Barna, he might go insane. He's not here right now, it's fine. This is when he like immediately appears in chat now. Oops.
Yeah.
Oh wow, Milk just tweeted Saints gone full Tolkien, never go full Tolkien, and link the stream. Okay.
Beautiful.
Fun. So in the Valley of the Unseen, which is in the Scarus Peaks, for people who don't know, the Scarus Peaks is a very small section of the world map, if I get the world map up now, in the southeastern corner of Colabria, the world. Sesame is technically the world, actually. That's something we'll get into later. So, to get the full map up. Okay. Basically, the Scarus Peaks are named so because of the scarred silver veins that run through the mountains there, which are harvested by the pirates of the Camarian conglomerate. That's another thing that we need to go through. We'll get there. But the Teppy Wigs live in a very small place to the north of the Scarus Peaks. It's a little area nestled in the mountains there. When this map loads, would be wonderful. But yeah, so basically they're short people, aren't they, Effect? How tall are the Teppy Wigs, did we say?
I think around 3 foot,
Yeah,
like somewhere in there, in that range between 3 foot and 4
they
foot.
are little people. Let's hop on the Tepiwigs page real quick.
I think a big inspiration for the Tepiwigs were the halflings. But
Halflings and hobbits, I think.
exactly, but we expanded upon that, made it our own thing, gave them their own lore and their own origins.
And they're fun. They're fun little guys.
They are very interesting. Their lore is filled with emotion, filled with all sorts of things.
And will break your heart.
Well, definitely, 100%. I think it's one of the most surprising developments from the first episode. Like, I think it set the mood for the whole.
You mean it was it was the first time I noticed, or that I realized that everyone who is in this community are depressed. Basically, that's like.
I mean, look, it reflects
right?
the world. It reflects the writers. It reflects everybody that
all of us have a problem.
Yes.
Because we took something so happy, we made a very happy little group of short, joyous people who play music and love berries and all this kind of stuff, who sealed themselves away from the world because they just didn't want to be violent, and there was a war going on. The Dividing Wars. Some of us are just bipolar, yeah, Jackal, sure. So they sealed themselves away, and then we were like, okay, cool, but imagine, and I was like, oh god, here we go. They were like, but imagine, they think trolls are gods, and the trolls have tricked them, and the trolls are sacrificing them and using their hearts, which have a healing ability, to give themselves regeneration. And I was like, sorry, what?
I think that slowly developed. Like, we started off with the idea of a very fun group of short people, and it expanded upon giving reason as to like why they're alone, why they're isolated. And as we built upon the environment, they so slowly just developed into worshipping these beings, but we never at first made it trolls.
No, we were like, just tool people. Sure.
Yeah, then we were like, look, let's not go with Goliaths or anything, because that's very stereotypical mountain people. So we went with something that's like familiar monsters. Everybody knows trolls, but we made it into something different, and made it into something that even the trolls themselves despise, because even these people are too brutal for their own people. Yeah,
so the Gorg trolls are actually exiled from other troll groups. They call themselves the Velikani, and they are like fucking evil. They're not evil, they'll just do anything to advance themselves and prove themselves to be stronger than other trolls. And as part of that, they came to find the Tepiwigs. And they found out about the Tepiwigs' healing ability, which is based on like basically boring science stuff, but it's based on their hearts, right?
Jackal, they're not humans.
They're not human. The trolls are the trolls are not humans. I mean, actually, no comment. I studied politics. Let's not get into it. But
well, let's not get into that.
Let's not get depressed today. We will.
To be fair,
but so the Velikani found the Tepiwigs, agreed to help hide them from the world using a cursed form of druidic magic and something which they call the Shepherd's Crook, I believe, which is a magical cursed druidic item which allowed them to twist the environment itself, the mountains and the woodland that surround this area, and make it almost impossible to get in or out of.
Yeah.
Yes, Jackal, the ones that will do anything to get ahead of others, so humans, basically. Yeah. But yeah, so they agreed to this because they didn't want to get into the bloodshed of the Dividing Wars, which were brutal. For many reasons, both because there were different groups fighting each other, north and south, but also because the gods used it as a time to attempt to tame the world, and scarred it horribly. But yeah, so the Tepiwigs are a whimsical, musical, and naive group of short-statured people who live in the Valley of the Unseen. Now, some of them have gotten out, right? In fact, we agreed that some did manage to leave either before it was cut off, or managed to make it through the woodland in the after effect, though very few. And those guys are called the Exiles.
Yeah.
Also, we have Art now. Look at this. He's such a cute guy. I actually love him so much. Mr. PNG on Fiverr, legend.
They are very beautiful, very pretty people, despite
Legend.
their story.
Like, look how happy he is, and then think about what the trolls are doing to him.
I don't want to think about that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's fine, right? He's happy. Leave him be happy.
Yeah, well, we can't seem to do that. We just can't do it because you guys made it depressed. So the trolls, over time, convinced the Tepiwigs they were gods. Because they did this magic and actually saved them, they kind of believed that they were godlike entities. And they perpetuate that. And they perpetuate the fear that the war is still going on beyond the forests of the Wiccan Woad and beyond the mountains. Which obviously it's not. This is millennia and millennia ahead of when this happened. Poor guys. And they sacrifice people in rituals in the Pilgrimage of the Chosen, where they send people every couple of months, every 6 months, wasn't it? Twice a year, I think we said.
Yes, twice a year.
Up to the mountain, up to Goreg, where they, quote, become one with the gods, which actually means get sacrificed to the gods.
Mm-hmm.
That part's obviously not told to them.
Yeah, it's the whole premise of the relationship, let's call it that, between the trolls and the Tepiwigs is based on manipulation and exploitation. It works, but you just don't tell the Tepiwigs. It's fine.
Yeah, we'll just continue letting them sacrifice themselves ritually. No, but seriously, I feel like this could... I want to make a one-shot for this area. I've already started writing one for this area. Of a group of Tepiwigs on the Pilgrimage of the Chosen, reaching Goreg and trying to escape. That is a one-shot that I am writing. Genuinely, such a fun place for players to stumble on in a campaign setting. Like, can you imagine if they stumbled their way through the Wiccan Woad into the valley and met these people? I mean, it's such an interesting dynamic, because we also agree that Tepiwigs would never... They don't want people leaving because they're scared that they'll tell the world that they're still here. But at the same time, they'll never be violent towards anyone trying to leave. Because they believe that the forest and the mountains will protect them, right?
Yeah. There is an element of the Tepiwigs, which we haven't mentioned yet. Despite their friendly demeanor and the way they behave, the Tepiwigs are very uncanny valley almost with the way they behave towards you. They're very friendly, but almost too friendly, if that makes sense. They will greet you and introduce themselves to you, but if you show any signs of departure or anything in the social norm of leaving, they will turn up the friendliness and force you to be there and stay longer.
Yeah, it'll be like, hey, there's a festival tomorrow, you're not allowed to leave before then, that would be really rude, and things like that.
And they'll guilt trip you into staying.
Yeah, it's like a malicious kindness, but born out of complete fear that there's this war going on and they don't want people knowing they're here, and they'll never believe anyone telling them that the war's over.
Yeah, it is a very paranoid type of manipulation that stems from a place of good, but develops.
They're trying to help you. They're like, it's better here than it is out there where the war's happening, you know?
Yeah,
but at the same time, they have no idea what's going on, but they will never hurt you. If you leave and you make it out or not, they believe that the druidic magic and the gods, quote unquote, the Goreg trolls will protect them, and that they will deal with you, essentially. Like, they will never raise a fist against you.
No.
But they will be very creepy about wanting you to stay.
Mm-hmm. It is one of the also reasons why the one shot that will be created would be really a very interesting way of doing it, because you don't really see that often in tabletop settings where, yes, there is a lot of DMs that are able to portray that sense of wanting to stay, but trying to describe it to you through a story writing perspective will be very cool and very unique.
It will make you uneasy. It's gonna be very Lovecraftian in the way that it will get to you will be by not explaining things, not by explaining things. It's going to leave a lot to the imagination. But I feel like that's what makes this area so fun. It'll be like, oh, you notice this thing. That's it. You don't explain it. You don't explain fuck all. It's just that's a thing. and then you just leave someone to think about it. But yeah, so
Being placed into
this was the first episode. Way back
There's
when.
much more. A lot more is in there, but we haven't really gone over
Any of it.
Basically, like, yeah, you get the general idea of what we did, but it leaves so much more to interpret, to like talk about. But I feel like that's something that can be read out on your own, and you can decide as the DM, as you write, how do you want to interpret all that, because obviously how we put it out is pretty obvious. So, yeah.
Yeah, but we also want you guys to creatively interpret all of it as well.
Exactly.
That's part of the fun. So this is the Valley of the Unseen. This was the first area we looked at. I think in terms of words that are difficult to say in this area, we will be putting actual like audio bites. Me and Effect will be doing for a bunch of these things, so you can, figure all that out. I think Gorala's one, so that's the High Priestess in Trolltongue, the person who runs the city of Goreg. So she's like, she runs it in the background. So she's the Gorala being that. And then the Shadom is the queen. So you have the queen and the High Priestess. The High Priestess actually runs it. The queen is like the face. Mother of Regrowth, First Exile, Birth Mother, and Blossoming Field Warrior. That's all of the names that the queen has. But yeah, the reason that they start extracting the hearts, we actually talked about as well, is that the Shadom, the Mother of Regrowth, she was dying and found a way of healing herself using the hearts of Tepiwigs. And then realized that she can do that for her people too. Mm-hmm. And that's what caused this kind of beginning of this loop, as it were.
Yeah. It also stems from a relatively good mindset. The way of doing it is questionable as anything, but the way that it's interpreted is, again, up for you to decide on how she behaves, and you never know what her motivations are. The protection of people you care about can drive one insane.
Yeah, and I feel like we've done a lot of work in the whole of this world building. It's been one of the things that we focused on quite a bit, is on actually not making any character like completely evil or completely good. Everything is in a grey area. A, because that's more relatable and more realistic, and B, because it gives you so many more story avenues that you can kind of play with as a DM in this area. So many more things that you can actually like take and build something of your own out of. I think that's probably like the best part of it.
Definitely.
You know, like we can give you the bare bones of the people and the places, but it's still up to you to describe those people, to act as those people, and to really make the pen and paper environments that we write into a living, breathing society, right?
Indeed.
And that's not easy. So we're giving you as much as we can, basically, and taking the ideas that everyone's given us and just running with it. And you guys have to fill in the gaps. Which I think that's about all from the first episode of Colabria. Well, episode 2, technically, but the first one where we talked about actual stuff. What did we talk about in episode 3? Kamaria. Yes.
Oh god, then
the
go into the wider
princes.
World.
And Flux. Yes, this is where things get even more depressing.
It's a different type of depressing.
It is.
Kamara is the world in which the Valley of the Unseen is part of. So, as you zoom in out of the valley, you will see Kamaria itself. And we kind of begin talking about the whole, I guess, region of the continent.
Yeah, so the Scar's Peaks as a whole. But Kamaria, the Kamarian Conglomerate, which we decided it was going to be called, they are the main global civilization of this area. As in, they're the ones that are recognized, they're the ones that are actually, like, seen, right?
Yeah. They are kind of, well, it's a nation, I guess, of the people who reside within Kamaria. And the way we have started writing about this is we took one idea, and it happened to be pirates. And then we just built upon it and started creating the Comarian conglomerate. Sorry, I can't pronounce it properly, but
Yeah, it's fine. Kumarian conglomerate. It's a basically like organization, greedy, based on money. Yes, Jackal, like most humans.
Yeah, and the residents aren't all human. There are humans. They're not all human. This is one of the nations which is like multiple races and half breeds and essentially outcasts. It started off as like a group of outcasts moving away from their homes. So some have royal backgrounds, others don't, and eventually through migration and raiding and piracy, they got to Comaria.
Where they hit misfortune. That was the original. They made it to the frozen lands, which is in the very south of the map. So if we actually get the map up of Comaria, still being... There we go. Comaria. Let's actually out. Let's get that up. It's in the very kind of south of the world. So there's a lot of snow, a lot of ice. Basically, they made their way here, fleeing from things like authority and law, and they were struggling to survive in this very, very harsh environment. So what they did is they then happened upon a being called Flux. Now, this is where shit gets real complicated, doesn't it? Because Flux is the god of sins and virtues.
Yes. Well, when we were writing Flux initially, there were some differences. He wasn't the god of, I guess, all sins.
He was just the god of greed kind of thing.
Yeah.
Originally.
So because of the way we initially wrote the pirates, we had greed at the back of our minds when we were writing it. So it made sense, but we expanded upon the idea of not just greed, but the idea of the seven deadly sins, and we expanded upon it to make one god kind of based around that, and we branched out into this. Well, he's a very complex being, but also very sad entity that lurks in the Scarus Peaks. He's kind of like the how do you call this? Like the host of that land.
Yeah, he's the god who somehow is bound to this region, the lore of which we haven't actually deep dived. So, again, up to interpretation as to why this area in particular. We kind of made Flux to be a bit of a mystery. So, why is he in this constantly fluctuating state? Why, what is it that means he can't have an identity? A lot of what we wrote about Flux was, again, something that became very kind of depressing, but also made you feel sorry for a god that originally seemed very evil. You think of sins, and he made a deal with the 3 pirate princes, the original 3, in his state of sin. So during that time, when he's perceived when in a state of sin, he will transform into, they will transform into a mirror of your sin, of your greatest sin. When being perceived by multiple people, they'll shift uncontrollably between the people witnessing them. But they never have an identity of their own. They're always mirroring someone. They're always reflecting someone and shifting uncontrollably. They also are then the god of virtue, but they can't control when they're virtuous and when they're sinful. Extreme instances of either can cause them to switch, but it's random. And in that sense, they are very much a chaotic, neutral god, because they do not know, they don't mean to do what they do, and they can't control what they do. So they made a deal with the original 3 pirate princes in a state of sin. And obviously a lot of the pirate princes' greatest sins were greed. Not all of them. One was greed, I think one was lust, and one was, what's the other one? Wrath. Because we have one because we had Bootlegger Jones, I think, was more like fighting based. Then we had the greedy one who went to the silver mines in the mountain. And, no, it wasn't lust. What was it? What's it called? Let me find this on the document.
We had Bert, who was the fighter.
Oh, Bert that was it. Bert was the fighter. Bootlegger Jones was the greedy one. Togtar was he was like the jealous one. Like, that was kind of his thing.
Yeah.
Ooh, not fun. But yes.
The princes are also, like, up for interpretation, but their personalities are kind of in their name and the way they're described. I feel many people can relate to how they should behave in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Because we like made sure that no matter what, they are representative of, well, one of the sins, one of the elements that we've built with Flux as well, because there needs to be a reason as to why they got to this point, and the whole story of this land is, the mistakes you make just get worse. The sins you commit just expand into worse and worse, and are all related to one another, and that's how Flux got into his own little issue with the champion.
Yeah, so Flux, in Flux's state of sin, he made a deal with the princes. Obviously, that over time began to tear the princes and the land apart, because that was just a purely malicious, inadvertent move on his part to create this chaotic landscape. Then, in their state of virtue, they regretted it and started trying to fix things. It was in this that another individual, who we did actually decide the name of eventually. Where is his name? It's in the next episode, I think. But basically, the champion of sins, who I do actually have a page on, so that's fine. He then approached Flux and
Joffrey
essentially begged him, Joffrey Talonwing, and he realized how much the deal was damaging their kingdom, was damaging the Camarian people, and he made a deal with Flux, basically to allow him to balance the sin and to attempt to bring balance to the Camarian conglomerate to stop it from eating itself alive. Now, when he made the deal with Flux, Flux was in a transitional state between sin and virtue, and so accidentally gave the champion of sins, a way to control both sides in balance the way that they had never been able to themselves, which kind of stabbed themselves in the back. Flux's greatest envy is that they can't have an identity for themselves. They don't know who they are. And then they gave that power to the champion. And that's kind of his biggest wrath, their biggest wrath and their biggest envy, because they gave everything they couldn't be to another being, who now acts as the keeper of balance within the Camarian conglomerate and within the Scarus Peaks itself, to stop it from completely destroying itself.
Yep. By giving the greatest gift, he damned himself because of his own sins, which is very ironic considering he is the god of sin. But granting the champion of sin, Joffrey, these powers, just inadvertently created another god, who isn't officially a god.
He's more like a demigod.
Yeah, but he kind of like has control over Flux, even though he doesn't really want it.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing then about Flux is that when Flux is in a state of sin, he'll do everything he can to destroy that which the champion has been working towards. But when he's in a state of virtue, they feel very, like, upset with themselves over what they did and are trying to help the champion. Yeah. So they are simultaneously the rock that crushes the champion and the pillar that holds them up. So it's this very complicated relationship that you can probably see shifting through Camaria if your players ever go there, if you build a campaign in this area. There will be times of strife, and there will be times that are more profitable and golden and balanced. And that's kind of showing the shifting nature of the god itself that caused this land to be this way, and the fights that Flux now has with the champion. And also, yes, hey Azzy, how you doing? Nice to see you.
Hey Az.
But yeah, so we made a very difficult thing. Basically, I'm building tables for this as well, roll tables, so you can decide when when Flux shifts, and in what situations they shift purely on chance. It's quite fun.
That would be more of a DMing tool, I think.
Yeah.
As like when you want, you can also just do it like when you feel the plot is working towards it.
But
obviously, it's up to like you.
If you want it truly random, which is what the name suggests, you can roll it. I'll make a table for it. As a DM perspective, you can just be like, fuck it, roll a dice. Because that could lead to chaos.
That would be awful. That's the point, I mean.
That's the point.
Yeah. It's... Well, yeah. We basically just put everything into one. We just spoke about everything, really. There is more on the Champion of Sin that we have
a lot more,
in the
and on
episode.
Flux.
Yeah. Yep.
There's a lot more on both, and the Camarian conglomerate itself, but I think we should hop on, because these parts, again, this is all fairly easy to say. All of this stuff is quite easy to understand. Where things get complicated is when we then turned to the native species of the Scarus Peaks, which is hard, which I believe was episode 4?
No, episode 5.
Is it 5? Oh, Jesus, we talked about the God of Sins and Virtues for so long. You can read up on all of that. We'll be adding it to the website shortly. Likewise, you can also watch back on the episodes as well. Most of them are up on YouTube now, so do that. Right. Oh, no, it was in 4 and 5. Okay, so 4 was the bestiary, which we do need to go over. 4, we talked about the Jackarak as well. Here we go, Jackaraks. So we created the Jackarak as beings who live in a primal forest that spans the middle of Camaria. Basically, of the Scarus Peaks. It almost acts as the border for the Camarian conglomerate's land, I think is the best way of putting it.
Yeah, they're like the people that, I guess, lived there before the Camara became what it is industrially. Before then, there was just the Jackarak, who, by the way, I love the name of the Jackarak. It's an awesome name, which we'll get to as to why it's called that. They're kind of like the natives of the lands that were getting their lands taken from them. There's that little dynamic as well, which we'll get to. They're very tribal in behavior. They're very savage, but in their own way, very peaceful. Giants. They're huge people. Huge,
hairy, Yeti and Wookiee-like beasts. They're quite fun. Basically, the Jackarak's name come from the sound of like the roar that they make, in a very similar sound to that. But the interesting thing as well is that the primal forests still span most of Camaria, most of the Scarus Peaks, I should say. So, although the pirate princes, or the ex-pirate princes, I should say, the now princes of the Camarian conglomerate, although they are slowly taking more and more of that land and cutting more and more of it down, it still spans the largest area, and the Jackaraks still definitely outnumber them in that sense. But they're such a primal and like nature-driven people that they don't have like, unless something gets too close or threatens them too much, they're not gonna do shit.
Yeah, no.
So you have two different kinds of Jackarak too, right? So you have those who live in the snowy areas in the south of the Scarus Peaks, and those are the Groundwalkers, and those that live among the branches in the north, and those are the Tree Striders. And both have vastly different opinions, civilization, needs, homes, but they all have the same kind of stories and links to their past.
Yeah, they're very unique in their own right, but they stem from the same root of the race. So the race doesn't change. The fact that there's a Tree Strider doesn't make it a different race. They just have different traits to them as like how they live. Their lifestyle is different. So that's kind of the greatest change between each of the, I guess, sub-races.
Sub-races, yeah. So you have the Tree Striders are basically amazing at climbing, moving at height, all that kind of stuff. Whereas the Groundwalkers are very much burrowers. They predominantly live in underground spaces. For one, to help deal with the cold that is on the surface, and for another, to hide from predators, because, my god, did you guys make some horrifying predators. How many did they make, Effect? How many how many of the ones on that episode were actually half peaceful?
Barely any.
Let's have a look. Right. Let's go down them, shall we? Buildings, they're okay. They're neutral, but they will still spike you on sharp sticks that they dig in the ground as traps.
I mean, they're just defensive. It's fine.
Well, it's how they catch their prey.
Yeah.
They just never intend to actually get you. They're scared of people. We did make an agreement that they pretty much just run away from people and try and go back into their burrows, but their burrows are close to the surface. For the, some races trust Saint to make an entire race of subs. Fuck you, Jackal. But no, they burrow in the ground. Their burrows are quite close to the surface so that things fall in. That's the idea.
Mm-hmm.
They are duck-billed mammals. Did someone say Perry the platypus? No, I'm joking. But yeah, so they make little dens. They're neutral, but they are quite scared of things that are larger than them. They will, like, avoid them. But they're not that bad. But then what do we have next, Effect?
Vobris, which are saber-toothed womp-rats.
Yeah, because womp-rats in general, you know, wombats are cute.
Yeah, they are.
Not really sharp teeth on them.
These ones are a little territorial and aggressive, which I think wombats are as well.
Yeah, but give territorial aggression to saber-toothed creatures.
Yeah. What else?
It gets worse.
It gets much
the
worse.
Vasu. Yeah. Pocket-sized raptors who swarm.
They're feathers as well.
Yeah, I mean, raptors actually, we do believe, were like the original birds, basically, so they were feathered.
Yeah.
In terms of... That's some fun science facts for you. Evolutionary facts.
Evolutionary, yeah.
But yeah, pocket-sized raptors who swarm.
Then we have the Hyalisk, which is a flesh fly, but it's huge. Kills you first before laying the larva in you. Hold on, I need to read this properly.
Yeah, you do. So flesh flies. Okay, so flesh flies are an actual insect in this world. Flesh fly in real life. Flesh flies, they don't actually, they're very small. They just lay eggs in dead things. That's how they get their name. They are carnivorous in nature. But yeah, so flesh flies. I was like, cool, this is like a primal space, right? I was like, things would be big, right?
Yeah.
Because they were back then. You know, we have fucking skeletal structures that tell us that. And learning is not for losers, Milk. But yeah, so I was like, fuck it, let's just make a giant fly. But instead of it just laying eggs in dead things, it kills them first.
Yeah, when we were like making some of these, we had the challenge of obviously Kamara being in a more cold climate in a big portion of it, and obviously insects are a bit functioning like differently biologically in colder climates, and they're much rarer in those areas. However, we made it work and made the Hyalisk. There's more creatures that are similarly insectoids or insects in some ways, like the
this is hard to say.
Giganius.
Yeah. So this one's more fun. This is dumb as well. Like
it's a giant shelled creature with a beetle-like visage, a face, which don't really move and are used as landmarks due to their grass-covered bodies looking like hills.
So we're talking like wood lice type back, so you know, segmented shell. They curl up and become hills, essentially. They just become part of the environment. They eat trees, they eat vegetation. They're chill. But when they do move, they just move to eat. They eat like a large portion of trees and then go back to sleep again.
It's like whales. They're like whales in the ocean. They just go and eat the plankton and get on their merry way.
Yeah, and then they go back to sleep. And then by the time we wake up again, trees are growing back because they sleep for hundreds of years.
Yeah, they're gargantuan beings, colossals. And you never know, the adventurer that travels through the primal forest might walk across this creature without knowing it.
Yeah, and be damned if you're on the back of one when it wakes up.
It could be fun, could be a fun ride, but could also be bad. I don't think they would even look at what they're eating, they would just go ahead and eat.
They just basically just move forward with their mouth open, eat a few trees, swallow some shit, go back to sleep. That's kind of how they work.
I can definitely see some DM making a Pinocchio joke in there.
Yep, probably.
Sending the adventurers into the belly of this thing. You can make a whole campaign inside one.
You probably could, to be fair.
Yeah, that's something.
Then what else do we have? The Salvo. Salvo are fun. Dragon-like heads that can breathe fire. We were talking about dragonflies, and we were like, how cool would it be if we actually had a dragon-like insect?
Why?
Like a dragon-like fly. A small winged dragon fly. So think of a dragonfly, but its head is like a dragon's. It can breathe fire. It had a reddish hue. It has 4 wings, which, dragonflies have 4 wings.
That's a dragonfly, yeah.
And it flies like a dragonfly. And is insectoid-ish. And has a horned tail that pierces things.
It's for defense. Sure. Yeah.
It's a weird fucking creature. I'm gonna have to explain that to a concept artist.
Yeah, I mean, it's a dragonfly. Dragonfly. In the most literal sense, it's both things at once. So yeah, it's a medium size, so it's quite big, but not huge. But yeah, then we have the Triboris, which is a tri-horned warhog-like creature.
Yeah, warhogs are fun anyway. Warhogs are dangerous, actually, in real life as well. Kind of similarly to boars. Boars and warhogs are surprisingly dangerous. But just give them horns. Because again, those creatures are not scary enough as they are.
Yeah, it's like wild boars. They're like from Lion King, Pumbaa. That's the first thing that came to mind.
I love that that's what comes to your mind. Yeah. Not wrong.
It's just with 3 horns, and much more territorial in a sense, which they are already, as you said, but they're very interesting. That's going to be an interesting creature to
so the little ones are territorial as well. Good hunting, actual good hunting meat for the Jackarak. Some of these are things that they would hunt and use in their kingdom. Then we have a fun one. Oh, this is my favorite, the Arclight Shimmerbug. Because again, you guys can't make anything that's just nice. So you started off by saying to me, hey, think about fireflies, but then they change color in arcane ways, and they're really cool and stuff. And I was like, yeah, that's really cool, like purples and blues and stuff. And they were like, yeah, but now make them evil. And I was like, what? And you were like, yeah. So now they actually lure you in, and then go red, and then turn out, and then kill you by luring other beasts to you.
It's a very symbiotic creature that works with the environment.
And I was like, you just took something really cute that could have been really nice and made it evil. Again. So yeah, but I mean, they are hunted and used for sticky salves that glow when they're applied to things, so they are actually used as a resource, but they're incredibly dangerous. There's a lot of fairy tales and folklore. I know I've nearly finished a tale, actually, about someone finding these, a young Jackarak, getting lured into the forest by them.
A lot of the land's folklore is based around some of these creatures as well.
Yeah.
The Shimmerbugs being one of them, and Saints have been working on a very cool story in regards to that, which hopefully you'll get to see at some point. But
you'll see it soon. It's nearly done. It will go on the website in the Tales section. But yeah, it's a fun creature, which again, you took something really cute and multicolored fireflies that glow loads of different colors and are arcane and shit. And I was like, yeah, amazing. And you were like, and then it kills people. Okay, should have seen that coming.
Yeah, I mean, they're chaotic, evil little things that essentially are ambient, dangerous, and
They lure you in.
they could potentially be a very nice way for the DM to redirect the party if they wanted to.
Oh, 100%.
If there is ever a situation, they can be used for that, as well as to build upon the dangers of the land.
Yeah.
And as you like travel across the forest, you might see a bunch of Jack-Rack in their villages referencing these things. But they might have their own little names for these. They might have, with the way that the Jack-Rack are, they aren't exactly complicated in the way they name things.
It'll be like the light bugs, things like that. They'll be like, that's what they'll call them. But they are fun, and it can definitely work as a misdirection tool, as an added side quest almost in this environment. And just add a lot of, again, it makes the world feel more alive. If you're running as a DM in this environment, when you build a world, what you want to think about is ways to make that world feel more alive and make your players feel, instead of just being like the main characters driving the story, and yeah, your players are that, but make them realize that the world around them grows and changes with them. Like, the world around them is not static, the world around them has its own personality, and that it is going to influence the players, and it is going to influence their actions. And making it seem moving, making it seem alive, using these kinds of things, just being like, oh, you see this off in the distance. Or like, just describing how they walk through the environment and bringing up loads of these little creatures. It makes it feel more believable, and it gets them more invested in the space as well.
Yeah.
Something I learned over a long time. I'm a forever DM. I don't get out of it.
Definitely. Moving over to the next creature, which is very different to the Shimmerbugs. A laboring type of creature, which is an Enderus.
Enderus, yeah.
Yeah.
Worker beetles. Woo!
Yeah, so they're basically like horses, but beetles, or like donkeys or cows could also work. Depends on like what type of species you work with. Anyways, they're large, neutral, just beetles that are used for transporting cargo by the Jack-Rack. As all species, even the Jack-Rack can be inventive and domesticate things.
Just because they're primal doesn't mean they're stupid, right? Like, they're smart.
Exactly. So they use these giant beetles that are found across the lands. You can find some in the wild as well, but the ones that are quote unquote domesticated by these furry lizards are called Enderus. And
I think what's fun is like a visual as well, is like, you think that, most civilizations use like horse-drawn carts, right? These guys just find a giant beetle, throw some ropes and shit over it, and tie a bunch of bags to it. That's essentially what they do. Like,
what's interesting though is like worker beetles, real beetles in real life, have laboring properties in their own little insect society. So they are very hardworking insects naturally. So to put them into this world makes sense. Like, you might think putting a beetle next to these Jack-Rack sounds weird, but if you think about it deeper, there is logic behind why they would be used. And if you have a giant version of an insect, they can carry a larger load as well. And the shell that all beetles have is very protective, so they could be ridden as well as held together with the cargo that they would transport.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to think about as well is that this environment that we've built is a primal space. Primal space is often had, like, if we think back to kind of eras gone by where we did have things like dinosaurs, giant beetles, giant flies, like, they were very much bigger back then. Obviously, over time, they shrunk, etc. The environment has changed to not allow them to be catered for anymore, but in this space, they do work. And that's why it's, again, that continuity is also really important in world building and making a space that's believable. And this is why this space does make sense, and in the environment in which you set it. Like, if you took any of these creatures, most of them anyway, and put them into a different space in the world, it wouldn't make sense. It would seem out of place, it would seem wrong. But here they do make sense because of the setting. And that's why describing a setting to players when you're building a world, or when it's the world that you've built, certainly, like just when you're running a game in general, when you're describing the setting, it's incredibly important for continuity reasons. So do be descriptive, do add in little details here and there. Don't just be like, oh yeah, there's big trees. You know, like that's not the space itself.
Broad way to say it, yeah. You need some sense of identity to the land when building it, as what we've done with this is taken a theme and made sense of it in the world. And the way that the rest of Colabria is built, you will see that as we move over to the other places that aren't Kamaria, you'll see a theme of adaptability, that only specific things can work there, which is what Saint was just saying about making it make sense.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's also interesting to do it that way because it adds a lot more variation to your world. Instead of those big trees, try death is everywhere, even the pretty bugs will kill you. Yeah, no, well, that's true. But no, just when your players enter this environment, say they'd just started traveling into the primal forests from the Kamarian conglomerate. Say they're pirates searching for a new area to exploit or something, right? As they're entering, just be like, the towering trees above you cast shadows across the ground, putting you in almost complete darkness. You can talk about the burrows that are seen much larger in the ground than any insect you've ever seen before. You can talk about the way that the environment itself seems to have thrown you back in time. That none of this is normal to you. You know, even just when it comes to, maybe you see a skittering beetle go across a tree, and I'm very generous with entertaining you, I know. Maybe you see a beetle scutter across a tree and it's 3 times the size of one of the same kind you've seen before. Just little things like that slowly set the scene for the larger things they encounter later on. It makes it seem less out of place, and it makes it feel more alive and more believable. And that will allow your players to really get into and like really hold on to the experience. They won't be offhanded about it, they're less likely to brush it off, and it also makes them more likely to be comfortable in RP situations in that environment as well. Getting players to be comfortable with that can be very difficult sometimes, especially if they're new players. But by making the environment around them kind of making it very alive and making it feel as if it's pulling you in, makes it so much easier for the players to jump in and join in with that environment, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense, especially when you mentioned the setting in RP. Is a big job of the DM is to give context to the player on what to do as the character. And an element of RP is to be able to respond to the world in an organic manner, as if part of the world. And what I've seen many, I wouldn't say mistakes, it's just an observation that I've seen with many people who do campaigns and whatnot, is the players themselves will often push aside some of the lore that a place has in it. But through this, and if it's described the right way, a player is able to just jump on the bandwagon of what's been described. So when you might be put into an RP setting that you might find confusing, there is that little hint of the DM mentioning you that little village. So you have something to focus on, for example, in the distance, or these burrows that you can explore, and add some of that to your own description as a player, because you never know. Your character might be fascinated by this place, and you might end up stumbling upon scratch marks that don't work for any creature you've seen before, and you end up discovering, oh, it's a Jackarat claw, because the way they are made, especially for the burrowers, is almost like a like a mole rat, like, you know, they have these.
Yeah, they have like
these
longer
huge-
talons almost, like sloth-like almost talons
Yeah,
that
pretty
help
much.
them climb, burrow, etc. Survival techniques. But yeah, it's things like that. It's just making an environment that makes people want to explore more, and that really helps people be creative in their own respect, which is what you want. You know, you want to give people space to write the story with you, because I find that one of the joys of DMing for me, and one of the things that I've always loved about it, is that yes, I write the broad outline of the story. I write a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? That's essentially all I get. And the middle is so vague it might as well not be there, right? Because I know where the players are starting, but what I want them to do is I want them to write the story with me, because that's essentially what D&D is. It's essentially what all role-playing games are, you know? I give them an outline, and they fill it out. They make it fun. They make it interesting. Like, they decide how they do each thing that I throw them into very unceremoniously sometimes. Like, they decide how they tackle every obstacle. The roles decide how well they do it, and that leads to some really fun moments that just take the story in directions you'll have never gotten on your own. You know, if you're ever intimidating about writing stories or books or short tales or whatever it is that you might be interested in but are scared of, the same way as if you're interested in building worlds and are scared of it, it's not such a daunting task when you have other people who are there writing it with you. And that's where D&D is like an entry level kind of creative writing course, essentially, for any person to get involved in.
Yeah.
That's what I've always admired about it, to be honest.
For sure. And I find that if you have a good writing partner or group of people that are working with you, who essentially co-DM with you, in many ways, helps so much to not only loosen up your own skills, but you get to learn something from them as much as they learn from you. Because there's always been that like stigma that the DM is the big writer of the place and the players are just there for the journey. No.
Yeah, hell no.
The players are part of the story as much as the DM is. The DM is just putting down the building blocks that you add to.
Yeah, we make the foundation.
Together,
you build the building. Like,
exactly. And together you build it up, and you just go to places, and with environments that are as vividly created as this, for example, with a community like the Perpetual Nonsense, we get to really explore that collaborative writing element together.
And it's a lot of fun. You guys, as much as I joke about you guys all being depressed with kind of the depressing shit you throw at me, like, it is very interesting, and it leads to so many multifaceted ideas that just make such an interesting world to write in and to navigate. And honestly, like, I've made worlds myself before. I've actually built 2 different worlds before, both with full civilizations, power structures, all this kind of stuff in it. And yeah, that took a lot of time for me, and it was a lot of effort, it was a lot of work. I was in school at the time, so I wasn't doing as much, but like, doing it with other people, doing it with you guys has given so much more depth to things that I couldn't possibly fathom on my own, or that I would never have thought of on my own. Like, I've had a lot of fun with that. Like, genuinely, like, some of the stuff, again, as much as I joke about it being depressing, like, it's believable and it's relatable, and a lot of the content you'll actually be able to pick up and kind of run with, and your players will connect with it. And anyone, again, like, I write shit. I'm writing a tale about a young Jackarak in the primal forests, you know? And I've been able to connect so much with that environment and those people that I've been able to just write a short story off of it. And that's so much fun. Like, you know? You guys will see that soon. It is nearly done. You know, and just expanding on projects that way, and it gives so much inspiration to do more and to build something bigger within the bare bones of the structure that we're giving you here. Because the reality is, all of this stuff, it tells you what kind of creatures are there, it tells you what kind of environment it is, but in terms of exactly what's where and how the people actually act and how the world itself acts, that's still up to you as a DM to decide. You know, every character that the players are going to interact with, we don't write that for you. You know, we give you the rough guideline of like, oh, this is the kind of place they live, and this is the kind of shit that they might believe in. but you still have to make the characters that they interact with. You still have to make the world, and your players still have to make the decisions that are going to impact the world that you've built. And sometimes it is going to really fuck up the stuff you've built, and you've just got to roll with it.
That's the fun part about writing, though.
Oh,
You never know
man,
where it's
yeah.
gonna go.
Well, that's the great part about, do you know how many times I've gone into a session and I've been like, I'm really going to plan this one this time. Like, I'm really going to write this whole, like, 2-page document on everything that could happen. I'm like, I've got it down. Like, they're going to do one of these 10 options that I've written out scenarios for, right? Like, fully in depth. And then they do something so absurd that I just immediately throw it in the bin. I'm like,
a guy seducing a dragon.
I could not have predicted this, but I'm going to roll with it now. And the thing that makes that easier as a DM, and again, less intimidating, is if you know the world well enough, if you know the environment well enough, it's not that intimidating at all. Because no matter what your players throw at you, you can think, okay, you have like this quick mental search in your brain. You're like, what's this place like? What would they do in this situation based on what I know about them? It's like this 2-second mental moment. Sometimes a little bit more, depending on how absurd your players have been. But it's like this little moment where you go, okay, I know the world. It's not that scary. Cool, I can run with this. I can literally improvise the next 2 hours of this session and the dumb shit my players have done, and it'll be fine. Like, it will be fine. Because you know it well enough to be able to say that. And it makes it means you don't hesitate, it means you don't run a shit session, because genuinely you recognize and understand that what your players do is gonna throw you off guard, and you're prepared for it not in what you actually prep for the session, but in what you know of the environment.
Yeah.
And that's what all this shit does.
Yeah, that's basically the groundwork for getting to know the place and working with what you have, and if you have enough, hey, you can just make something really cool and really engaging to everyone involved. And
it will still be unique. It's not like saying, if you used some of these templates and some of these creatures in this environment and write a campaign in it, that's not saying that it's not unique, because the way your brain processes what information we give you and the way that you create, like I said, the NPCs, the individual entities that they come across is still vastly different to how the next person's going to do it.
Yeah. Like, we've noticed this, at least I've noticed it, when I was helping out in chat with how people were throwing suggestions in for the languages, for example.
Oh god, Elvish.
We'll get to that eventually. But
we got a little bit sidetracked, but we're talking now, so we're here.
Yeah. Like,
this is just like a D&D session. You get sidetracked so easily. Anyway, yeah, go on.
Definitely, yeah. But what I noticed is how people perceive suggestions. For example, it's like someone will point out something in a language, for example, as to like why they got to the conclusion of, okay, why is this called this in that language and why not something else? But then you see someone else put something else in there and point out the same word, but something different in that word that can mean something else. And then you just see that thinking process difference can mean a lot in development.
It's like you watch the natural evolution, essentially, and it's really so cool. Yeah. It's so cool to watch.
Very satisfying when you see it. But yeah, God, we got so sidetracked. I'm sorry.
We did. Right. Okay. Back onto the topic. We have more creatures, but rock leeches, again, because you guys hate everything, we're gonna run through these real quick. Rock leeches, huge fucking leeches with scales that act like natural armor that drown people as they suck the blood out of them. Because why not?
It's basically spring traps, but leeches.
It is, yeah. Oh god, I hate that.
That's rock.
Yeah.
But no.
We hate people. Maracas. Maracas are poisoned eels that live in the shallow, murky river waters. They stun you with a poison and drag you under, drown you, and consume you. Basically, never go in the water, I think is the gist we got from the Primal Forest, right?
Yep. And another spring trap.
Basically, you enter the water, you die. That's like 90% of this area. Because also, that's where the greater Drogue live.
I think this one deserves a little bit more time.
This is, if anyone knows D&D, think a Tarrasque That's this challenge rating right here. Like, that's what this is.
The greater drug. We have
The
a lesser
greater
drug as well.
Yeah, the lesser drug is like, yeah, don't worry about that. The greater drug.
A nerfed version, yeah. A nerfed version of this one, yeah.
It's a baby version. That's still quite hard to kill, actually. I've been looking at like how I'm going to design the elements of that. Even then, I can't make it easy.
Yeah,
like, they literally can't make it easy.
These things are like, if you like, the way I always imagined the greater drugs is they're somehow related to the Jackrack, but because they are like giant Komodo dragon lizards.
Vastly like, different evolution.
Vastly different evolutionary lane when between how they both like have a common ancestor. That's the sort of way I imagine these things. And this greater drug is this big Komodo dragon with back legs being like frogs, so they are very muscly and springy. They are much faster than they look. They look giant, but they are fast as well. And they pounce on their prey with
directional, not vertical. We should probably specify that now.
Good point.
But they're dangerous creatures.
Yeah, big frogs with small little grabby arms, scaled and armored, with do they have glands on their
so we designed them, but you designed them. I just typed and regretted it afterwards. You guys decided that they would have a corrosive, oozing gland underneath their scales that was essentially like sweat. So whenever they were out of the water, this gland would produce a thin layer of this ooze over their scales that basically makes them resistant to non-magical weapons.
Yeah.
But we were like, oh, that's a bit overpowered. So I was like, maybe we can tone them down a bit. And they were like, okay, cool. When it's in the water, this ooze obviously comes off them, no longer has the same effect. That's fine. And I was like, okay, cool. That's like a fun way to kill one of these, right? You get it into water. Except then you guys were like, okay, but when it's in the water, it moves at 3 times the speed.
Yep.
I was like, I'm sorry, what?
I mean, like
we're trying to make this easier to kill, not harder. But basically, it's more dangerous in different environments. It has different ways of being dangerous in both of its environments.
Yeah, and even though you might think the water is a beneficiary to this creature, it is one of its greatest weaknesses, which is something I found very interesting about this. But also with the gland, it can be described and explained logically as well, because many reptiles in real life do have some sort of gland that helps them move through water without it actually hitting their skin. So it's almost like a protective layer.
Like a water resistant, yeah.
So this sort of gland is almost something like that when they swim. It might not have the same corrosive effects through water, but there is a reason they have these glands that help them navigate faster through water and make their skin more resistant to the water itself.
Yeah, so it stops being a corrosive substance and starts helping them in other ways. But in this instance, the greater drog is like the apex predator of the primal forests that we designed. Yeah. And this is one of the creatures that actually comes up in the short story that I've written. And it's been a lot of fun to describe. Terrifying as well, but it's been a lot of fun to describe. But then you have its counterpart, the lesser drog. This is basically a small version. It's more agile, doesn't have the glands. It still has a natural armor scales, still pretty high AC in D&D terms. Looks deceptively cute is something one of you said, which I seem to have noted down. Alright.
I mean, that can work. There is cute lizards.
Some lizards do have really cute faces, to be fair. But then we also went over some plants, which I'm not going to run over right now. We're just going to go over the quick names. So shockweed at some rivers, you can kind of guess what goes on with that. I'm also making custom potions and lists and things like that from these ingredients that you can make as players going throughout the world. You have yellow angel and yellow devil, 2-sided sword, 1 heals, 1 poisons. They look very similar, apart from like very minor things on the petals. Semillion, which is used as a incense, which you basically, when you burn it, you have like a meditative effect on your body. It's kind of like a psychedelic, I guess, in that sense. But it's used in religious ceremonies by the Jackarak. Thornwood, which are huge thorn bushes. Seeds are poisonous, but if they're crushed and distilled, they can heal. So again, that's another one of those potion things. Dream moss, dream moss again. If eaten, it gives a short charisma boost. If burnt, the smoke causes you to basically be psychedelic in a dream state for 1d4 hours or until woken up by magical means. Visions, basically, again, used by the Jackarak. The hollow drum is just a simple bowl-shaped plant that collects water. It's useful for life forms in the forest. And dragon vine, which leaves scale-like marks, patterns on trees as it constricts them. That's the basic of the primal forest. I'm gonna zoom through because I'm recognizing we're already an hour and 20 minutes in because we got so sidetracked.
Sorry.
Don't you fucking dare apologize. On to Jackaraks themselves. We did talk a lot. Oh yeah, this is where I made the note of voice record names that are hard to say and put on website with effects help. This is Effect. Anyone who doesn't know, this is Effect's voice. Isn't he wonderful? Effect is actually one of the official co-writers on the Colabria project now. Has been for a couple of weeks, so congratulate him. He's doing great. He's helping me out a lot.
I'm torturing myself sometimes, but
I realized I couldn't work 60-hour weeks and do this all myself. I still work on my way to work, on my way back from work, and on my breaks from work, so you know.
I just help out a bit. I'm the mysterious voice that sometimes pops up.
He's the voice in the back of my head.
Sure.
So, the Jackarak clans don't like each other. That's pretty much the gist of it. Tree Stiders live in the north, like I said. Groundwalkers in the south live in vastly different lifestyles. Both, however, do have shamans who they meet on every full moon, to discuss in rotating villages. We have got the village names. They're very kind of basic, based on where they are pretty much, or what they do. The Jackarak are very simple people who function highly off of just getting from A to B and surviving, so a lot of their language use is very simplistic, a lot of their gestures and beliefs are simplistic. They're not the talkative kind, let's just put it that way. They just want to survive, get through, and do what they can. So you have the Willow Point, they're called the Earth Speakers, that's the Tree Striders, called Earth Speakers, and the Groundwalkers are called Snow Whisperers. Those are the kind of shamans of their areas. Obviously, if you do ever want to come up for what the Jackaraks themselves might call these positions, you're more than welcome to. We've already built one language, why don't we build another? Do let us know using the suggestion box on the website or in Discord. Just let us know what you want to think about those. Effect, how are we going to pronounce some of these names?
Oh god, this is where I come in, where we have actually made a bunch of these,
So Effect, you have, more...
I can roll my R's.
Yeah, you can roll your R's. You're used to more Cyrillic-based language.
I can. Yeah, some of these, the way the letters are placed, make more sense to me than they do to you.
Which is why Effect is going to be one of the big voices on the website that you will hear when you press the audio buttons next to all of these names.
Yeah. So, for example, the Willow Point Earth Speaker might look very confusing, but it's one of the most simpler ones. It
is.
Vinir Viewed Skegar.
Basically, silent K, silent J, almost. And then Skegar's pretty easy, I think.
Yeah, the J is kind of pronounced like a Y.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a thing in all the languages that English doesn't have, but that's a beauty of language, really.
I'll be able to roll my R's one day. I'll be learning by trying to say all this shit over and over again.
Then we have the Waystone Earth Speaker, which is Loxen Leruthel. That's
an easier one, to be fair. In any tongue, you don't need to roll shit for that. Loxen is the easiest thing you can say. The next one's quite easy. Dragonville's, which I still love the name of, Bukarak, which is quite easy to say in general. Yeah. Grateful for whoever the fuck came up with that one. And Odazin as well, also fairly self-explanatory. Easy one to go with. Fairly phonetic, both of those. They're quite phonetically spoken.
We have some of the Groundwalkers, which is, we have the Forest Cradle Snow Whisperer, Zarzith Jikmada.
Also easier,
Whistlepine Snow Whisperer, Kaldaka Smunsu, Shard Spire, Snow Whisperer, Pukwot, Joth.
Which is, I love that name. Is that bad? Like, it just sounds, it's so fun to say, like, Puckfod. Puckfod is just so
Puckfod,
fun
yeah.
to say.
Definitely. Then there's the next one. This one's, I don't know who thought of this one.
I don't know who thought of this one.
Frostleaf Burrow Snow Whisperer, which is Becky Moore. The putting W and M next to each other
is
sucks.
brutal. It's brutal. It's like Becky Morn, but like it's
Becky
the movement
Moore,
that your lips have to make to just make the transition from the W to the M is so awkward. So whoever came up with that, you really like fucking with us. It might have been you.
Been me.
It probably was. You fuck with me all the time with this language. It could have been me, for fuck's sake. It could have been Henry. Oh, God knows. There's a lot of people in that chat. It could have been Vort. Could have been Lee. There was a lot of people in this episode.
The Fruitless Snow Whisperer is Lethrikar, which is pretty simple to pronounce, really.
Yeah. Then we have the actual names, because these guys speak in Primordial as their common tongue. Because obviously they're quite an old and ancient race focused around survival. Like I said, a lot of their language is simplistic, fairly harsh as well. So you have the Vitonsta, which is the one I can say quite easily. That's the Tree Striders. Groundwalkers. Effect, you want to take that one away?
Kerp Ini. Actually, a fun fact to say when I was actually giving suggestions for some of these names for the primordial language, I took inspiration from Indo-European, or Proto-Indo-European in real life, which is basically the forefathers of some of the European languages.
European Cyrillic mainly, right? Like Eastern European?
More so on the Eastern European side. There is some Germanic and as well in there and whatnot, but that's its own little branch. But yeah, Proto-Indo-European is the main inspiration I took, which is why some of these might seem a bit weird, but they do have logic behind them. Like, my main rule in pronunciations is if I can pronounce it, it's okay.
I think the other thing is, though, as well, like, you got to recognize that if you are someone who's interested in building your own world one day, whether this is just your kind of, like, startup or whatever, I would say that when it comes to languages and, again, making a world more believable, making you more invested in a world, language is a great way of doing that, because not everyone sounds the same. Like, if you go out into the world today, not everyone sounds the same, right? There's lots of different languages out there, different accents, all sorts. Bringing that into a world that you build makes it more believable and makes it easier to connect with. But at the same time, when you do make languages, draw it from inspirations you already know. Don't try and go out of the window and make some crazy shit up that you will not remember, that you'll forget how to pronounce, and that you won't understand. If you can't pronounce it, your players won't be able to pronounce it either. That is one thing I will say. That's why we're making little sound bites for all of these, so you can listen to how they're pronounced and copy that. But a lot of the time, like with languages, drawing from previous inspirations or from languages that already do exist is actually your most stable basis for it. Like, it will help people connect as well if they can draw on some similarities in the language of their own, even if they're not consciously doing that. Like, they'll subconsciously make those connections, and then they'll make it more believable in their own mind by doing that as well.
Yep, and you might get, like, reminded, oh, there is a word that sounds like this. Oh, let me take it, right?
Yeah. You're like, oh, that's like that. That's how I'll remember it. And then they remember parts of the language without you even asking them to.
Exactly.
Right?
Like Pukwot. I feel like it's a very easy and fun word to pronounce, so it's going to be remembered much easier.
Exactly. And
like
Vitonsta just again, it rolls. It's very easy to say. It's kind of fun. It brings some more. Kerpini, yeah, 100%.
Like, you can also pronounce it Kerpini, right? But some people can't say that. Like, I might be able to say Kerp because I can roll my R, but someone will just say Kerp. Fine. Sounds like a name. Like someone could be called Kerp.
Oh, 100%. This is
like, it sounds similar
fantasy
to Kerp,
worlds. It could be anything. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's the
basis.
Chakarak.
Yeah.
And the basis for building a language and building unique aspects to a world as well. Episode 7, we went on to a really fun area, which I think me and you, Effect, both of us are really excited to go into more detail with. Episode 7, we started on the Wild Heart Concord, which is based in the Azra Tempio, in the heart of the wilderness, the Rios Cridi. Having said that, it's not the only place where these druids exist. It's just where the conclave exists, the Concord exists, basically. So we will still be expanding on these druidic areas, and you do a lot, effect. We will still be expanding on this, and like we still need to decide where the other 3 main temples of the druids are going to exist and that kind of stuff. Like there's a lot more we still need to expand on here, but we focus just on this actual region, which is purely druidic in nature, not in another realm, that kind of stuff, which is the Riodos Cridi.
We've made some links to the Great Divide in here as well, which just sort of, as we build these places, we kind of just expand upon it with other areas as well. So we'll see a bunch of mentions of the Divide, but also it's its own thing. Like
so the Great Divide, we should probably add context. The Great Divide is a stretch of desert across the center of the world. I can actually get that page up as well. It's a stretch of desert across the center, which was caused by the gods actually separating the world north and south. In different religious groups, they're told different things about the Great Divide and the nature of it. The Druids recognize it as the day the gods tried to tame the earth. The earth itself being called Sesmi by the Druids, being called Tarak by the Jakarak, is a slumbering god. And the Druids actively worked to protect the world. The gods tried to tame it, and in doing so scarred Sesmi's back, which left this desert stretch in the middle. That's the Druids' perspective on it anyway. So the religious people, the actual followers of the divine gods who did that, who created this vast stretch of desert which destroyed cities, civilizations, was that they were trying to stop a raging war that was going on from the north to the south. And they wanted to separate the nations that were fighting and stop the bloodshed in an act of kind of showing their strength and showing that humanity needed to calm the fuck down, essentially. In like a very casual way of putting it. Basically, casual. Like, it's quite like a brutal environment. It's desolated. There are a couple of oases throughout this area, but most of it is just utterly destroyed. There are ruins of cities where people who did survive the Great Divide live, but are now broken and reverted to tribal means and much more scared because they live in very harsh environments. There's different things like massive, where the rivers used to run are now rivers of quicksand, where lakes used to be are now lakes of quicksand. There's like all of these horrible, where once there would have been beautiful nature is now just completely destroyed by divine means. So it's quite a brutal environment.
I want to point out that we've basically established that through writing the Wild Heart Concord, which is a great way of saying, like, no matter what we write about, there can be lore made of other regions as well, as we build, which is a great thing to see and develop naturally. Another thing, though, is with the Concord, we have, I think, spent the whole episode trying to figure out all the temples and what they do.
We did. We spent a long time trying to figure it out. We created the Concord in this area. When we were designing the map, actually, we were putting all of these veins, what looked almost like veins, in rivers that flowed through the land, connecting everything. And I think it was you, actually, who said, like, oh, it's kind of like a heart.
Yeah, it looks like veins.
Yeah, it looks like veins in a heart. So we were like, okay, this is Sesmi's heart then. This is the heart of the Druidic people. So then we said, okay, this is the home of one group of Druids then, the Azra Druids, who are the heart of the world. Then you had the Vatara Druids, who are the fury of the world, wherever we decide their temple may be. They are the fighting force that protects Sesmi with everything they have. They are Sesmi's wrath, essentially. Yeah. You then have the Kulus. The Kulus are the seers. They're the eyes. They are the scouts. They're the seers. They're the ones who Sesmi connects with to show them great catastrophes that could happen or that are coming. And they then react accordingly to try and prevent and or to keep something, like to make sure something does happen. They are kind of the mind. They are the eyes of Sesmi. And then you have the Kuraf. And the Kuraf are the mind of Sesmi. the brain. They are the ones who, they have all the books and the lore, and they teach and they learn. And they learn of the world, and they learn of the people, and they are the ones who help direct people, the rest of the druid groups, where they need to go.
Yeah.
Which has been a lot of fun to write. It's been a lot of fun to work with.
The system of the druids is relatively, like, if you dissect it, it's quite simple. But in their own right, they have their complexities, their personalities, as every area does. And what we've done is basically, what you hear about the Azra druids is similar to what the other places are, how they used to be before the events that occurred, but they all have their own paths. It's similarly to, like, the way I imagine it is, like, places of study are, all of these places are places of study. All these temples are places that have their own basis of knowledge. It's like real academics. Like, you have fighters, you have scholars, you have healers, medical fields, you have
seers and scouts,
yeah, who also have their own training that they have to do. And after the events, they all migrated over to the heart, to the center of. It made sense. Like, if you hear about it, it makes sense. They would go towards the energy that, I guess, heals them and that has the most protection.
Yeah, because I think the best way to think of it is, like, yes, their temples still exist in their singular forms, but when the Great Dividing happened and the Dividing Wars that caused the gods to scar Sesame happened, they unified under the Wild Heart Concord, and they came together to fight together. And what's interesting about the Ryudos Kridi is it's right on the border of the Great Divide. So that is where they made their stand, and that is where the Concord still calls its home. Now, that isn't to say that every druid is there. Like I said, for example, the Vatara still have the Vatarian temple, the Vatarian Tempio somewhere. We haven't decided where yet. And they still train people there. It's just when they become strong enough, then they send them to the Azra Tempio to join the Concord. That's the idea. That once you get strong enough in your individual temples, you're sent on a pilgrimage to the heart. And it's in the heart where you are given a crystal, which connects you to the ground. It connects you to Sesame, which is grown in the Ryudos Kridi. Mm-hmm. And the crystals are essentially, if you're talking D&D terms, or actually a lot of fantasy terms, they're like your spell focus. That's what allows them to, like, interact with nature and cast nature-based spells. And it's in this pilgrimage. It's when you end here in the Concord's home, in Azra Tempio, in the Ryudos Kridi, that you really earn your rights as a druid.
Yeah. You will learn a lot as we talk about this, is that the world becomes an organ, if that makes sense. It becomes a whole body, which will actually, the lore is that the world, the Sesame, used to be this god, and you'll see a lot of biology develop in the land itself. So, for example, the Wild Heart Concord, or Ryudos Kridi, is the heart, and the crystals that come out do have healing properties because it comes from the land itself. It is the world reaching to the druids to get healed. It's reaching. It's physically asking. It's like the white blood cells in the body trying to protect you, but there is something stopping them from doing their job. And or like when you have when like you start bleeding and the red blood cells try to go and climb and rebuild your cells. It's very organic in the sense that the world breathes and lives as you stand on it. And the druids know this, and we'll get into this later. There is a lot of in-world religious debate as to if the gods are good, if the divine is even worthy of worship, and
there's a lot of conflict. There's a lot of conflict between, like, the paladins and clerics of this world and the druids of this world, because the druids see the gods as beings who have attempted to tame that which they, like, tame nature, to tame the world, in awe of their power and of her power. They call Sesame, it's she, and yet the religious are like, no, they did that to stop us fighting. There's this like big conflict, like who do you believe, which is which, what's real? Did they scar Sesame on purpose, or did they do it to try and stop man, like the humanoids from wiping each other out? Like, it's very much like the druids are hard set on this one belief, and then the paladins and clerics are hard set on another. And that dichotomy as well is something that's going to play into this world if you play in it, or write campaigns in it, or join campaigns in it. That's something that's going to play in hugely to the way campaigns are written.
And
it's
how NPCs
nothing
react
like
to.
what you'd see in like D&D, where like druids generally get on with everyone, right? Like,
Yep, this
traditionally,
one doesn't. These ones don't.
in this, no. Like, if you believe in a god, then you are a sheep who is enslaved to a wolf. Like, they genuinely don't
You
respect
get
you.
exposed to judgment. You get exposed to a lot of judgment from the druidic beliefs. But this is also like a great point where the NPCs might react to you differently if you are a druid, or how you react to NPCs as well will affect this. It's a great roleplay point to like
Huge.
follow.
Yeah.
Like if you're ever interested in playing a druid in this world, the Wild Heart Concord is the place to explore this, because it will have the most lore on this, and we do try to make it as feasible as possible to make sense.
But then we also obviously are fleshing out all the other gods as well. So much for the tolerant left. Yeah, no.
Well.
We flesh out other gods as well, like for example, in later episodes, which we're actually getting up to now. Oh, we're actually getting onto it now. We'll hop forward. This is a 3-part document because I did 3 episodes in one. So when we then moved on, this is in the last 3 episodes, we've shifted to the Dusk Elves of the Olivoan Empire and the Duskmoor. And what we created is, so there's the Dawn Elves and the Dusk Elves, both sharing a border, the Dawn Vale and the Duskmoor. And they are created by the hands of 2 gods who are twins, Arta and Adita. The goddess of dawn, Adita, and the god of dusk, Arta. And basically Adita started creating her own people. And in his jealousy brother ways, Arta copied her idea, but made them his own. Hence the differences in the colour, but in the colour of their skin and their properties and the blood that flows within them. But they obviously have the same kind of basic foundations into their physical appearance in terms of form and structure. Now the elves, they worship the being that created them, which gets very confusing. So the Dusk Elves, they are a very kind of what's the word?
Stoic.
Patriarchal, stoic society who follow the Arta, the god of dusk, father of darkness, all this kind of stuff. But that doesn't mean that he's evil. Like we said before, we don't like creating stuff that's strictly good or strictly evil, because I don't believe that ever exists. And it makes it more digestible for players, but it also gives you more opportunities to change stories and to write something truly interesting. Like, giving stuff a black and white sheen makes it so hard to be creative. But if you give it shades of grey, it just leaves so many opportunities for you and for your players. That's something I would always recommend. So, with the Dusk Elves and their support of the god of dusk, Arta, they have a really interesting environment. They are very chilled out as a people. They are very good, like, counselors and gravekeepers, and they believe that the end isn't something to be scared of, and that the dark is comforting. It gives time to rest, it gives you time to heal and feel safe, and they don't fear that time. A lot of what they do is based around a very calm perspective of life. And they're very laid back people, because they also live a long time. And so they don't rush through anything. They just kind of exist and try and help other people get to terms with that with them. Which I think is actually quite a noble consensus. Now, that isn't to say that there aren't evil people within that. There's evil people in anything. There'll be evil druids even. There'll be druids who take it too far. But I'm saying that in this, their version of evil would be people who are like to the extreme, you know? And for them, that's kind of the religious temple. Take it a little bit far.
The thing with the Dusk Elves, like, their focus is necrotic in death, as you said. So they have honor as well. The Dusk Elves do have honor in their society and respect for the dead. And I feel like a good version of an evil person is if you take and desecrate death itself, which is their home and their peace. And I feel like something that would go against these people is going into the direction of breaking the peace. I guess that's one way of looking at it. There's always you can go the big.
There's a lot of extremes you could take.
Yeah,
like you could take the extreme of someone being like, I'm putting people to peace by killing them. Like that's another extreme.
You can justify killing.
Oh yeah, you can do that with anything.
Yeah, like there's so many ways you can go, but that's the good thing about this world, and the Dusk Elves themselves as their outlook on how the society works. And as we've established, their society is much more complex.
Much more complex. I mean,
than I think any of the other ones.
The fun thing about these guys as well is, so they worship obviously Archer and Edita, and the way that Archer and Edita work is that Arta rises as Edita rests. Edita is an effigy of the sun, so she is not the sun itself. Let's say that now. There is still a sun, which gives light, but she essentially rises and moves as the sun does, where Arta rises and moves with the moon. And the way the Dawn and Dusk Elves see it, because they're intrinsically linked to these, is they ignore the rest of the world. They're like, I don't care if it's day over there while it's night over here. They don't think about that. For them, they believe that Archer and Edita rise and fall from the mountain that's kind of near the border of their realm, of their two empires.
Yeah.
And this is, in a way, true. Archer and Edita don't need to be moving with the sun or with the moon for dawn and dusk to fall. They are representations of those, and they are, in part, what makes them happen, but they don't need to be moving with it. And in this essence, we created this, again, very multifaceted aspect to these two gods, where they're siblings. They obviously fight, they squabble, they don't necessarily get on all the time, but at the same time, they protect each other. So in this mountain, in the Nochni Bedum, which is what the Dusk Elves call it, they essentially... The rock itself creates a darkness that shields Edita from the world. Arta protects Edita, and Edita protects Arta from that which would do the mountain harm.
Yeah.
So it's this two-way street where they hate, sometimes they hate each other, sometimes they fight, sometimes they squabble, and that has a very feasible and visible effect on the conflicts between the Dawn and Dusk Elves at any given time in the world's history.
Yeah.
But they always protect each other, too.
Yeah, there is an element to their conflict that, yes, it's a conflict, and as any racial, I guess, conflict has, there's going to be warfare, there's going to be disagreements. But as a society, as elves, this isn't your typical conflict.
No, not at all.
If there is a threat that would occur that would harm either of the faiths, the other will jump in and assist. So we're not talking about like full on, this guy hates this one. Again, it's not black and white. We try to make it like it's almost wholesome in a way that as much as I hate you, I will protect you and fight for you.
Yeah, if something came along, if an outside force, for example, say, what's south? So the Great Divide obviously lies to the south of the Duskmoor. Below that,
the trolls came attacking. No, if the trolls came attacking.
Yeah, say an outside force attacked the Duskmoor, whatever that force may be. The Dawn Elves would jump in and fight with the Dusk Elves to protect them.
Yeah.
It's this, we can fight between us, but if anyone else tries to get involved, you're going down. That's pretty much the gist of it. It's like, yes, I can hurt them. Yes, we have our differences and we squabble and we fight. And there's been massacres on both sides. And certainly not the best of friends. But if an outside force comes and infringes on that, or tries to get involved on something, they'll be the one who's being attacked by both sides.
Yeah.
It's like a unifying event almost.
Yeah.
You know?
Definitely.
And we had a lot of fun also with lunar and solar eclipses. where in lunar eclipses, dusk elven blood is weakened due to the moon crossing and blocking the light of the sun. And dawn elven, other way around. That's lunar eclipses when the sun... Oh god, brain. Sun, moon, you know what I mean. Okay, so solar eclipses are when the moon blocks the sun. That's when dawn elven's weakened. Lunar eclipse is when you can't see the reflections of the moon, essentially, because of a blockage of the earth. Is that correct? I'm bad at science.
The lunar eclipse occurs when the moon moves into the earth's shadow.
Yes. So in these events, the blood of each is weakened or strengthened, depending. Lunar eclipses are called nights of the shadowed moon. Solar eclipses are called days of fading fire. In both instances, the number of times that happens in a year is based on the purity of the faith of those who follow, which is where a lot of religious shit gets complicated and where a lot of conflict happens. Or at least that's what they believed. Is that true? Fuck knows. That's something you can decide as a DM. As such,
and as a race. Yeah.
As a race, yeah. In both empires, those who are born on one of the 2 days that strengthens their blood. So for the Dusk Elves on the day of fading fire, and for the Dawn Elves on the night of the shadowed moon. For those born during these times, they have much more of a stronger connection to their god, and they are much more powerful. And that leads to them to be in positions of power or authority or leadership. The Dusk Elves get real confusing real quick. Thanks for the follow, man. Appreciate it, Game Masters Vault.
It gets confusing, but it's
such a fun place to run a campaign. It seriously, the whole point is that we want to build stuff. Hello, nerd. We appreciate fellow nerds here. Yeah, so the whole premise for obviously this whole project is building a world that you can confidently write a campaign in, or give you ideas and tips on how to build a world for yourself, for you to then take those ideas and run a campaign with confidence, where you're not tripping over everything, where you can say for sure that you understand the area, so no matter what your players throw at you, and they will throw a lot of shit at you, you can kind of get back on your feet from it and develop a really fun storyline. So that's the idea. This is just all the detail we put into it to help give you a better understanding of the world's lore that you can then build upon, change, adapt as much as you like. This is a collaborative project. It is a Creative Commons project, which means you can use any of this stuff that you want. None of it's copyright. You can just use it as long as you credit if you are using stuff directly from the website.
Yeah.
I think that pretty much covers everything. But yeah, these elves have been so much fun, haven't they, Effect?
They have been. We've only tapped into the Dusk Elves, actually. All things considered, we did mention the Dawn Elves, but we still have to do a deep dive into Dawn Elves.
I feel like we should take a break next episode from the Dusk Elves, go to a different area, come back.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. But we do have a lot more to do in this area, but we have sort of built the foundations for ourselves, and we've done lots of language building as well, which we need a break from. Yeah, there's a lot to the Dusk Elves and the Elven race in general that is it's very complex, yet it makes sense, and I love it for it. And the aesthetic of the Dusk Elves is probably my favorite of this world. I love their aesthetic.
It's been so much fun. Yeah. I mean, I think the other interesting thing is we then had the conversation of, okay, but what if someone was born of both Dusk and Dawn Elven blood? Dawn Elven blood being celestial based and so divine based, Dusk Elven blood being necrotic based. So we were like, okay, well, most wouldn't survive, but if they do, that's a whole other subrace. Again, all of these are actually playable in D&D 5e right now. We've actually made subraces on the website, so do check them out if you want to play one or attempt it, or even just test some shit for us. We haven't fully play tested them yet. But these fallen elves then have kind of essentially vertiligo, or vertiligo, however you pronounce it, which is when your skin, it has multiple lighter patches on it. So their skin is covered in different patches of both Dusk and Dawn Elven colours, and this has made them hugely misunderstood. They have no real link to either of the gods. They're seen as blasphemous. They're really not great. They have a lower lifespan because of their just conflicting bloodline. Yep. And yeah, they've been kind of quite fun to write. They're called the Lightless Ones, the Fallen, Foolish Elves, things like that. They're not they're really hated. And this has made them outcast.
Yeah, they're outcasts. I think every like place has this. Everybody's familiar with the term outcast, and there is many reasons you would be outcasted, not just racial. This might seem racist, but I mean that's elves for you. I think
Oh yeah, we took the trope of racist elves and ran with it.
yeah. I mean, look, it makes sense in such a Puritan society like the elves, who do value their blood, and as we know, their blood is linked to their deities. It makes sense. This, as I said, even if it is negative in nature, it does make sense.
Oh, 100% it makes sense.
And what I love about the vitiligo of these, I don't know how Saint, how you've been imagining these, or how the chat imagines these, but I always
need to explain it to a concept artist at some point, so we've got to figure it out.
I always thought the dawn elves had a bit of a redder hue to their skin, like more like humanesque, right? Like lively, more alive. Whereas the dusk elves had a bit of that purplish blue hue,
like the paler kind of more corpse-like. Yeah.
You know how corpses go into like
similar way to how I thought of it.
The chilled state. That's sort of how I always imagined those. So like thinking about vitiligo is like there is a purple line between each of the hues as well.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun to work with, certainly from a writing perspective.
Definitely.
But from that, we also then grew this concept of Artemis and Adita have actually another sibling, a younger sibling who they'd forgotten about over the millennia that they'd been alive, or however long these gods have existed, called Artemis. And Artemis is a lesser deity. And we've written some really actually dark shit on Artemis. He's basically the god of lost souls. And I wrote a few little I've written some quotes and stuff that have gone on the website for this. And for Artemis, it's to those born, those thrown away, and those forgotten, which is brutal in of itself. And he was forgotten by his siblings, and so won't let these aberrations of their creations be thrown away the way he was. And he's kind of taken them under his wing in that sense. And it's been so much fun to write with that. And again, from a DMing perspective, if you decide to run something in this world, or work with us in this world, or whatever it is you want to do, which again, you're free to do, it really gives you just a lot more space to be creative, and a lot more space to just give players a world that's breathing and alive. And that's really what's important about world building.
And also something to point out, you are able to play as a fallen elf if you decide to be a player in a campaign.
Yes, it is, again, fully playable, written out as a sub-race.
So much fun. I'd imagine so much fun to be encountered by a dusk elf as you walk, being a fallen, and the dynamic you'd get from NPCs alone, let alone other players who might be encountered. Which I feel like it's a good way that this is written, because I often see in many other campaigns where you'd see like races don't get along, but because D&D as a concept is so broad, you kind of lose track of why that happens, right? Like you see conflict. You know there's conflict between these races. Like your character might not agree with this other character, but like why? At least this gives you context as to why, even though it is so basic to be racist, right?
It's a simple concept, but it's one that allows you to connect more with a character that you might play in the scenario, as well as connect more with characters, with NPCs and entities that you might meet going through the world, but also live in this context. And it gives you something to look forward to as well when you're in the world.
Yep.
Like, it's something I always admire. Like, whenever I build worlds that have open-ended questions, that have stuff that isn't fully fleshed out, that has lots of things that players might see and want to understand. Because the best way to make players interested, and the best way to make people who are playing your campaigns, the best way to make them engaged in the stories that you've written, is to make them actively want to ask questions. Like, that is just how it works.
Yeah, I can definitely see a situation play out between a fallen and a dawn elf, for example, and it will start off hostile, maybe even spiteful, but you can go into some deep conversations. Like I can imagine very deep conversations between a follower of Artemis and a follower of Adita.
Oh, 100%.
Just imagine the dynamic between two players, like two good role players, and they go so deep into this, and their characters go on like a 2 hours long conversation in character, fully RP'd out. Imagine the dynamic you can do as a DM. I'd be so proud. I'd be such a proud
100%.
DM.
Yeah. No, it's something to be proud of, you know, and I also think that doing stuff like this, when you fully flesh out a world in terms of its cultures, its beliefs, there's parts of that will translate as well. Like, I've been writing some short idea stuff on the Druids and the Druids' relation to the Great Divide. And in a quote that I was writing to help me get a sense of that area, the Druid refers to the sun as Adita. You know, she says, we don't want to be in the open when Adita rests, not when the sun goes down. You know, that brings different elements into the language that affects how you interact with the world and how you speak within the world. And again, it makes it feel more real and more alive.
Adds so much more impact as well from a story writing perspective, because you feel the hatred from the Druid when it says Adita.
Yeah,
you know?
100%.
Like you can see the wariness and distaste just from that one sentence. So good.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the fun things about language, you know? And speaking of language, we made a whole fucking language, which we're not going to go into detail right now. Some of these, we have a lot of stuff. All of this stuff we're going to voice on the website. We do currently have, it hasn't got everything. It's in the I don't fucking know tab folder of the website. This is all I can see. But it's literally called I don't fucking know. If we end up making more languages, I'll change it to the languages. But we do have a basic dictionary of terms right now of what we've come up with, verbs, basic verb rules that we have come up with, and grammar trends as well. Obviously, all of this stuff is probably going to change as well. I think me and Effect, I think we should probably just finish this off as best we can. I think it's going to be hard for us to keep going with this with everyone else as well. But I think with that said as well, next episode, we'll jump into a new area. We could decide that now. Let's go to the map.
Before we go into that, I just one more thing about the Dusk Elves, which I think is worth mentioning. As we were developing the language, we also established soldiers and guards. Based on just language that we've made. It was like, it made sense. We have these. How about the Lovo Lepaths, which are often called Yali, which are part of, because, well, the Dusk Elves are led by 3
religious leaders, high priests,
but which are called Sel Surnar.
Technically, it's led by a collection of lords, but they take all of their big decisions and run it past the priests. So
yes, because they have influence. And one of the 3 is the head of the, I guess, war force, the soldiers.
He's the head of the spies. The Lovo Lepath are like spies, both internal and external. They're kind of like the secret police.
Basically, they're kind of the FBI or CIA.
Pretty much.
But that's kind of, well, the way at least I imagined it is there is normal guards, like the Lovo crew, who are also trained in the same facilities as their assassins, but they don't get. It's like they're like the police, the military, the agency. You have all these little layers to it, but they're all in the Lepath element of it.
Yeah, so the Lovo are known as guards, which is why the Empire is called the Olivoan Empire. It's basically an extended term for guardianship, or being the guardian of. So they're basically the guarding empire, believing that they guard Nokni Bedem, which is the mountain in which Adita rests and Arta protects her. And that is kind of like their whole premise and situation. But yes, they do have different forces within them that are run by the Selsuna. You have, like he said, the Lovo Lepath, the Yali, basically. They are the preservers of faith. So they're kind of spies, both internal and external. The other guys are called Yaquil, I believe, is another one. Yaquil, Lovo Quilista. Quilsta, sorry. Which are they're the assassins. They're the shadows, basically. Yaquil. You then also have the Lovo Tenaj. The Tenaj meaning shield. And they are like the elite trained guards and protectors of the highest in society.
Yeah.
But then you also, like you said, you have the Lovo crew, and the Lovo crew are the actual just guards of the area.
Yeah, so if you're ever running campaign and you just come across a city in one of the Dusk Elven places, you might just see a Lovo crew chilling.
Yeah, and they're just called Yelovo because they're just seen as the guards. They're just the normal guards. Whereas you have, Yaquil, the assassins, Yaten, the protectors, and Yali, the preservers. Yeah. And in this sense, like, they each have their role to play. And they each are very, very different in how they carry out the tasks presented to them as well. Which I think is quite fun.
And we'll get into that a bit more, but I feel like I think we've basically established most of the stuff. Then we mentioned the priests already, and it's kind of self-explanatory. They have a bit of a religious outlook on their society, with lords and a bit of an aristocracy.
Yeah, and nobles in society are those who've had sons born on the days of fading fire. The Distroda and Ata, and that's this. Was it parents of Ata, I believe? Distroda, the chosen of Ata. Sorry.
The chosen.
Yeah, Distroda. That's to choose, not to be confusing. Distroda. Language is fun. But yeah, so I think that's like basically a complete summary. Actually, it's a complete recap of all of the previous 10 episodes of Colabria. We've so far built so much. We've done almost 3 completed regions of this world: the Scarus Peaks, the Wildheart Concord, aka the Ryudos Credi, and the Olivoan Empire of the Dusk Moor. I think next time we're going to move away from elves. We've been on elves for 3 episodes now. Not even all elves. We've been on Dusk Elves for 3 episodes now.
Yeah.
I think next time we're going to hop to a different area. So let's have a think about where we might go next. So we've done the Scarus Peaks. That's just down here in the southeast. The Kamarian conglomerate exists there, as do the Tepiwigs of the Valley of the Unseen and the local Jackaraks of the Primordial Forests. You then have the Wildheart Conclave we've done here in the middle. They are obviously the home of the Azura Druids, as well as the Wildheart Concord itself, and the Riodos Credi, the heart of Sesame, the world. And we've pretty much done as much as we can, anyway, without going insane, the Olivoan Empire of the Duskmoor.
Yeah.
Next up, we can go anywhere. We have so many more spaces to fill. I think we'll avoid Lun for now, the Kingdom of Lun. That's the Dawn Vale, the Dawn Elves. Yeah. We've got the Aurora Desolation in the north, the Baron Borealis being the South Pole. We still have to do the Isles of Tarn, the Korthas, which is the Radiant Steeps. We need to do the Eternal Plains, the Jade Mire, Blue Scale Meadows, Aorus Rises, the Hymian Rises, and the Cerulean Coast, as well as obviously the Great Divide. Beyond that, the Viridian Reef. Each of these mountains that are in the ocean mark places of merfolk. That is another thing that we discussed, so we can also deep dive into those guys if you wanted to, and their kingdom in the ocean.
God.
There's so much we can do. So if anyone has any ideas, you can say now. If you don't have any ideas and you want to just choose the next episode when we begin, that's another possibility. But yeah. we've gone over a lot. While people have a think about that, we've gone over a lot this episode.
The thing is, right, we've only started, but like we only did like 3 areas technically, and there's so much more to the continent itself.
Yeah, I mean, you think of it this way: this is the 11th episode now, each one between 2 and 3 hours. The other thing is, outside of each episode, we obviously do bullet points in each episode of an area. Me, you, Kirsty then go and expand on and refine it. Honestly, in my time, despite me working 60-hour weeks outside of this, I probably do about 6 hours on this stuff every week.
Yeah.
And I still barely cover I don't finish the content of each 1 hour stream.
God, no.
Of each 2 hour stream. So that's why, it's one of those things that I do catch up on. There's like a lot of information that's missing on the website right now. There is also a lot of information that is on the website. I'm reformatting some stuff at the moment. But it's worth it, I think. It's worth it. I do find it fun. But yeah, it's just a lot.
Well, yeah, for sure. If anybody has any suggestions, do let us know in chat or in the Discord.
Yeah, let us know in the Discord. Between now and then, we'll get a debate going. And we'll decide.
We do have a category made for Colabria.
We do. If you have the World Builder role, you will be able to see it. So do head over. If you want the World Builder role, you can get it in the reactive roles section. We will be notified of when every Colabria stream happens, as well as obviously having access to those chats where we talk about ideas and stuff. So bring the conversation over there. We'll talk about where we want to go next. We have so many more areas to cover, and so many more mysterious races and species to devise. Hopefully not too many more languages, or I will drive myself crazy.
Please don't. We need to pronounce those as well.
Effect, that's our job over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. To be fair, with the languages though as well, I've personally already started making some notes in my own little writing project with the language. So I'll run that by you, Saint, whenever, but...
Yeah, we'll run it by.
The way we have already constructed the grammar and everything, you can make feasible sentences with it that are pronounceable. Just saying. So we've done a good job. We did a good job with it, so it's great.
No, we'll get into it more, I think, over the next couple of weeks, and we'll get that stuff up on the website. I've just put a link in the chat into the website. If you did want to have a look around at what we've already got, you can use the search tabs on the website to look up pretty much anything you want. There are different segmented buttons that you can go through, locations, monsters, lore, everything, as well as obviously the information that we currently have on each of the gods, as well as some of the people that exist within the world that we've made, some of which have multiple subsections. Not to confuse you. So, with that said, do have a check that out. Between now and next week, we'll decide where we want to go next, and I hope everyone has a good time between then. I think Milk is going to be streaming a little bit over the next few days. At least he said he might. Not entirely convinced. We'll find out. But other than that, guys, have a great Christmas, or happy holidays, whatever it is you celebrate. That's coming up in 4 days, and we'll be seeing you after that. So, hope you guys enjoy some quality time with family. And just make the most of this time of year, guys. All right. We'll see you in the next one. And yes, Effect, thank you for joining me.
Of course.
I've not been talking to myself.
No, you haven't been. Hopefully in the future I'll be able to join a bit more of the streams and even help out more in the streaming side of things.
Always welcome.
Yeah, I'll just...
You're an official co-writer, Effect. I don't know what I'd do without you. And as a random side note where I end the stream, because this is perpetual nonsense, so I do need to add some nonsensical laughter into this. So I have some chocolate cornflake cluster bites, right? Like Cadbury stuff. They're great, by the way. Taste amazing. But do you want to know what the best before date says on it?
What?
61st of December, 2022. And I'm going to leave it on that note. Hope you guys have a great Christmas and a wonderful week. And we'll see you next time, guys. Bye.